Yes.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to Up in Your Business with Kerry McCoy, a production of flagandbanner.com. Through storytelling and conversational interviews, this weekly radio show offers listeners first-hand insight in starting and running a business, the ups and downs of risk-taking, and the commonalities of successful people. Connect with Kerry through her candid, often funny, and informative weekly blog, where you'll read and comment on life as wife, mother, daughter, and entrepreneur. And now it's time for Kerry McCoy to get all up in your business.
I'm Kerry McCoy, and it's time for me to get up in your business. Before we start, I want to introduce the people at the table. We have Tim Bowen, our technician, who will be taking your calls and pushing the buttons. Say hello, Tim.
Hello, Tim.
And recording our show to make a podcast available next week is our technician, Jesse. Thank you, Jesse.
No problem.
This show, Up in Your Business with Kerry McCoy, began with entrepreneurs in mind, a platform for me, an entrepreneur, and a guest to pay forward our experiential knowledge in a conversational way. As with all new endeavors, it has had some unexpected outcomes. The one I enjoy most is hearing my guest's biography, how they worked hard, took risks, found their voice in pursuit of their destiny. Another is that business is creative, much more so than people might first think. And last, behind each of my successful guests has been the heart of a teacher. My guest today is Mr. Trey Reid from the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission and host of the TV show Arkansas Wildlife, where he teaches us fun things like how to hunt, fish, conserve, and cultivate responsibly. Whether you like to sit on a park bench or backpack through the Ozarks, or a new word I learned today from Trey, hook and bullet. I did just learn that from him. You lucky listeners will not want to miss learning about the natural state's many outdoor treasures. You may even get inspired to visit some places anew, get a tip for improving your existing sporting hobby, or begin a new outdoor activity. If you're just tuning in for the first time, you may be asking yourself, what's this lady's story and why does she have a radio show? Well, Tim is here to tell you why.
Thank you, Kerry. Over 40 years ago, with only $400, Kerry McCoy founded Arkansas Flag and Banner. During the last 4 decades, the business has grown and changed dramatically, from door-to-door sales to telemarketing to mail order and catalogs, and now Flag and Banner relies heavily on the internet, including our newest feature, live chatting. Each decade required a change in sales strategy and procedures. Her business and leadership knowledge grew with time and experience, as well as the confidence to branch out into multimedia marketing that began with our nonprofit Dreamland Ballroom, as well as our in-house publication, Brave Magazine, and now this very radio show that you're listening to. Each week on this show, you'll hear candid conversation between her and her guests about real-world experiences on a variety of businesses and topics that we hope you'll find interesting. Kerry says that many business rules, like treat your employees well, know your profit margin, and have a succession plan, can be applied across most any industry. What I find most encouraging is her example that hard work pays off. Did you know that for 9 years while starting Flag and Banner, she supplemented her income with many part-time jobs? And that just shows that persistence, perseverance, and patience will prevail. Today, Flag and Banner has 10 departments, and I have 25 coworkers. It reminds us all that small business is the fuel of our country's economic engine, and they empower people's lives. If you'd like to ask Kerry questions or share your experience or story, you can send an email to questions@upyourbusiness.org.
Thank you, Tim. My guest today is Trey Reid, Assistant Chief of Communications for the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission, where his primary role is executive producer and host of Arkansas Wildlife TV show. Trey's career has taken him all over our great country. 11 years ago, he was a field reporter for ESPN2's BassCenter, where he traveled the 50 states reporting on professional bass fishing and conservation. 2 of his more interesting episodes were fishing in New Orleans, post-Hurricane Katrina, and the other bass fishing in New York City's Central Park. I can't wait to hear about that. Trey started in the newspaper business as a sports writer and later as sports editor for his hometown newspaper, the Pine Bluff Commercial. And for about 4 years, he was the outdoor editor of the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette. Today, he continues to work as a freelance writer and has had articles published in local and national magazines, including Bassmaster, Greenhead, AY, Fish Arkansas, Arkansas Wild, Arkansas Money and Politics. Outside of his professional life, Trey hides his identity by donning a Mexican lucha libre mask as part of his 5-time World Cheese Dip Championship team's costume, the Conquistadors. What a character. It is a pleasure to welcome to the table a man's man, the Assistant Chief of Communications for the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission, Trey Reid.
Hey, what's up?
Wake up over there.
I was, we've got to do social media all the time now. So I was noting that, I think you said I do like 250 radio and TV appearances a year in my role as Assistant Chief of Communications for Game and Fish. But this is my very first time on KABF 88.3, and I'm very excited about it because I am an avid listener of this radio station. So
you said it's on your dial all the time.
it is my number one preset.
Which show do you listen to?
Probably the blues show in the afternoons is one of my favorites.
And you said another one when you came in.
Crossroads on Friday. It's Friday evenings, right? It's like right after the blues traffic jam.
So you know Tim and Jesse are the Wednesday night show. What's the kind of music that you play?
We play every kind of music.
Oh, yeah, I always say
We
that.
don't have a set genre that we play. We just
that's right up my alley because I have eclectic taste in music, so I'm all over the
So
place.
Tim, your stage name on Wednesday night is what?
we go by the Logger Brothers. I'm Lou Logger. He's Bert Logger. Our show's called Phonomania.
Phonomania. All right, let's get down to what you do. I'm dying. It's really nice to meet you. You've just had a great career, but I've got to find out about this bass fishing in the New York City Central Park.
Yeah,
Tell us the story.
Bass fishing in Central Park. I worked in 2005 and 2006 on a show called BassCenter on ESPN2. BassCenter was, at the time, and still remains, the only show ESPN ever licensed under a derivative of the SportsCenter name. So that's a little.
What does that mean? Derivative of the SportsCenter name.
They don't have like NASCAR Center or Football Center or Hoops Center.
So this is called Bass
Center.
Center.
It's like it essentially our show was SportsCenter for fishing, professional bass fishing, and conservation issues associated with fishing.
Okay.
And I say all that to lead in the conservation side of things is really what took me to New York. You ever heard of the snakehead fish? Probably, because we had to eradicate them in Arkansas or attempt to eradicate them about 8 or 9 years ago.
Is that the gar?
Snakehead is an Asian fish that was brought here potentially as a food fish in the 1990s primarily. And then the federal government said, no, we don't need this foreign fish. We may have, you've heard of the silver carp that escaped mainly sewer ponds and wastewater treatment facilities in Arkansas in the 70s. And now we've got this foreign invader that's threatening the Great Lakes.
And what's the name of it again? The
Asian carp, the silver carp. But this fish I'm talking about is the snakehead, and very popular food fish in Asia. And somehow, either people released them or whatever, they showed up in a little small pond in Maryland. This was in, I think, 2002 was the first time they were known to exist in the wild outside of a farming operation. Pretty soon they showed up in the Potomac River. They are an established fish in the Potomac River now. Obviously, from a conservation standpoint, anytime you have an exotic, a foreign invader like that, they can compete with your native fish. And not just fish. We can be talking about vegetation or any type of animal. It's not a good thing to introduce animals that aren't native to an ecosystem. One had shown up in New York, out in the Flushing Meadows area, not far from Shea Stadium in the Queensboro. So we went up there to do a story about it. And we actually hired a Chinese interpreter and spent like one night in Chinatown trying to get somebody to sell us a live snakehead to show like this is how easy a fish could go from a market to being released into a body of water. Okay. So I'm interviewing a biologist from New York's version of Game and Fish. I think they call it New York Department of Environmental Protection. I'm not. It's kind of like our ADEQ and Game and Fish sort of lumped together in New York. But anyway, fisheries biologist, and And, I asked a question. I said, look, I don't mean this in a bad way, but look around us. We're in Queens. There's Shea Stadium over there. There's skyscrapers everywhere. Why should anybody really be worried about the presence of this exotic fish? I mean, what native fishery are we concerned about here? And he said, well, actually, there are a couple of ponds in Central Park, and they have some of the highest densities of largemouth bass of any of the water bodies that we electrofish sample in the entire state of New York. And I said, get out of here. You're kidding me, right? He said, no, absolutely. And so he said, I'll email you the data sets we have. And I'm like, well, this is great. So we're there for the snakehead story, but I'm looking over at the producer and the cameraman that I'm working with, and I'm like, we've got another story here. I'm going fishing at Central Park. So I remembered a few years earlier reading a story in Field and Stream magazine about there's one sort of like, there's a couple of like Orvis fly fishing tackle shops in Manhattan, but there's one kind of old school sort of bait and tackle shop called Central Fishing Tackle, and it's in the Chelsea neighborhood of Manhattan. So I looked it up. I called the guy, talked to the manager, and I said, hey, I'm Trey from ESPN. We're doing this story on snakeheads, but they tell us there's this fishery here. I didn't have fishing tackle or anything with me. Can you get us hooked up with somebody? Do you know anything about this? It's like, yeah, man, I've got a guy that lives around the corner that fishes there all the time. Come on down to the store. We bought some baits. He loaned us some tackle. The next morning, I take the subway from our hotel in Queens to Central Park, and we go out there. It was just, I'm talking about it, and I mentioned it in the bio that I sent you because it was truly it was a once-in-a-lifetime experience. Do
you have to get a special permit?
No, you just have I had to buy a non-resident fishing license for New York, but that's it. There are people, we went that afternoon before we fished, and actually there were people lined up around the lake. And if you have ever seen a movie that has a scene in Central Park, you've seen the lake I'm talking about. It's the one with the gondolas and the stone archway bridge. It's been in countless movies over the years. So we go out there, and the people are taking the gondola rides and everything, but there's a handful of people around fishing, and we did some interviews with them. There was actually a writer I think he still works for Forbes, if I'm not mistaken, named Monty Burke. He's originally from Birmingham, Alabama, and he had just at the time written a book called Sowbelly about the several people that were really obsessive about trying to catch the next world record bass. So we called Monty and got him down there, and he did a little interview with us, and he said, yeah, I've actually come down here and fished a little bit before. But it was amazing in that at 6:00 in the morning, New York may be the city that never sleeps, but it was still in the park. It was kind of quiet, and you weren't hearing sirens. And if you look down at the water and you're thinking about the fish and trying to feel that bait or watch for a strike or depending on the type of lure you're moving, you really kind of forget where you are for a minute. And then you look up, and there's the Dakota where John Lennon lived. And then, there's the building that the Ghostbusters skyscraper was based off of. And you're like, wow, I'm really in Manhattan. I'm in the middle of New York City. Now, as the day progressed and, the city started to come to life, you got those sirens and cabs and horns honking and all that. But and we caught the heck out of the fish.
You did?
We did.
Were they big?
Not a lot of big ones. 2.5 pounds were probably the biggest fish. But I probably caught 15 or 20 fish that, 2 or 3 hours that morning.
Why are there not a bunch of people standing around fishing?
I think part of it is, you're so close to the saltwater there. There's a lot of fishing in the East River and the Hudson and obviously, the saltwater in the Atlantic, and off of Long Island. So probably more of a saltwater fishing culture in the city itself. And a lot of people retreat from the city and go upstate. And there are really some nice fisheries in the Finger Lakes in upstate New York, St. Lawrence River, the Lake Oneida near Syracuse. These are some of those larger lakes. The Bassmaster Tournament Series they still go there to this day. And
So did you fish off a boat or off the side of the bank?
off the bank.
Well, they didn't let you take a boat?
No, I don't think they'll let you fish from those gondolas that you can rent.
Okay, before we get into all the Arkansas game and fish stuff, you were born and raised in Pine Bluff, Arkansas.
That's right. Yeah.
Did you always want to do what you're doing?
No, not really. When I was young, I wanted to. I kind of flipped back and forth between wanting to be in the performing arts some way, like an actor.
Well, you kind of are.
Or I wanted to be a football coach. I know those are very disparate sort of career paths to take, but those were two of the things that I thought a lot about when I was younger.
I think you kind of found it. And for everybody that doesn't know, you are big. How tall are you?
About 6'1".
Yeah, you seem bigger than that. You seem taller to me than that. But
my boots,
it's your boots.
It's my 2-inch heels.
So there's the theater part in him. So yeah, I think you found the balance.
I really enjoy what I'm doing, and
but you're a writer too.
I am, yes, absolutely, and that's honestly always. I found writing in high school, and really sort of. I guess I, blossomed as a writer in college. I had a professor at UALR named Huey Crisp, who I took multiple classes from, and it just really, I knew that once I got into those classes and I got some positive feedback, of like, I want to be a writer. And I still, despite being on TV all the time, I would call myself a writer first and foremost, and the TV, the public relations stuff is sort of second, in my mind at least.
I think that's really interesting that I don't think people really realize about you. This is a great place to take a break. When we come back, we'll continue our conversation with Trey Reid from the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission. We'll get him to choose what his favorite outdoor recreation is and where his favorite places are. We'll also talk about conservation, cultivation, water shortages, quail hunting, which my father used to do a lot of, and the business of Arkansas Game and Fish.
You're listening to Up in Your Business with Kerry McCoy. If you miss any part of this show, a podcast will be made available next week at flagandbanner.com's website. If you prefer to listen on iTunes, YouTube, or SoundCloud, you'll find those links there as well. Lots of listening options. We'll be right back.
All right. You're listening to Up in Your Business with me, Kerry McCoy. I'm speaking today with Trey Reid from the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission and host of the Arkansas Wildlife TV show. All right. I'm flipping channels this week, watching Channel 4, and your show comes on, and you're fishing for smallmouth bass on the Cato River with stank bait. Is that the real name of the bait, or do you just not know how to pronounce stink?
It is a bait with they call their, not all, but many of the lure companies now, when you're fishing with artificial soft plastic baits, they put some sort of, formula in there, some scent to sort of entice the fish to bite it. And honestly, the name of the scent on this particular bait was stank. Obviously, clearly a marketing ploy. It's gotten you wondering, about it. So it's effective, I would say.
There's a lot to say about that, but I'm going to keep from saying it.
You well, it's just, the FCC could get upset if we went too far down the rabbit hole.
That's right. It's a good thing that there's no woman that would ever say, let's market something and call it stank and think that it's ever going to sell. I would say that will never sell in a million years. Anybody that doesn't think men and women are different are wrong. I'm not that I'm trying to say that we don't want to be treated equally, but we are definitely different. There is no way I'd ever buy anything that had the word stank on it.
It's funny because there's an old saying that, but you're not trying to hook fish when you develop a new bait. You're trying to hook fishermen. And I used to have a blast. Some of the freelance writing I've done was for Bassmaster magazine, and I had a kind of a recurring little part of the section that I wrote for them where I had fun with the names of some of the bait colors. Margarita is a favorite color. Tequila Sunrise, Mardi Gras.
I know exactly what colors those are.
Well, Mardi Gras, yeah. How about California 420? With
Pink.
No, it's a green color.
Oh, it's
with
green.
some-
Oh, yeah. Darn, I should have known that. I wish I'd have seen the
maybe
hand
some
signals.
red or gold in there. I
Stop
don't know.
now. All right. So I have actually fished on the Cato River before, but we didn't fish with stank bait. We fished with Rebel Cray. I can't believe we said. The only
Hey,
reason.
a Rebel crawfish proudly made in Fort Smith, Arkansas.
Oh, really? Well, we had a saying that day, catch fish all day with Rebel Cray, and it worked. We did it. We caught fish on the Cato all day long. So talk to me about fish in Arkansas. Spawning, where and when. Can you, in bait, and I mean, I never know what.
You know, Kerry, the thing about it is there are so many ways to fish in Arkansas, so many different types of fish. And really what that boils down to is the diversity of our aquatic habitats, you know, because we're a diverse state. We've basically got everything but salt water, you know. The thing is, you've got, you know, let's start in the Delta, since I'm kind of a child of the Delta, being from Pine Bluff, and you've got the slow, sluggish bios, the Arkansas River, the Mississippi River. They're flat, they're widening out, they're reaching, you know, their terminus.
And those are catfish?
Yeah, lots of catfish, largemouth bass, things like that. You know, we've got the species are pretty consistent across the state with some exceptions, but the types of water and like where the better fishing for certain species may be. And then let's move north and west into the Ouachitas and Ozarks, and we've got clear, cooler mountain streams like
trout.
Yeah, we've got the trout now. Trout are not a native species. They were when we built dams, you know, in the mid 20th century for hydropower and for flood control in the Ozarks and Ouachitas. The cold water that came out from the bottom of the dams after hydropower generation killed our native smallmouth bass in those streams, like the White River, the North Fork, in particular, below Beaver Dam. In northwest Arkansas. So trout were introduced as mitigation for the loss of those warm water species. But we still have places like the Buffalo, the Kings River, the Ouachita River, where we've got those native smallmouth. We've got walleye. A lot of people think of walleye as a northern fish, you know,
We have
Minnesota.
walleye?
Absolutely. For a long time, the world record walleye, at least under one group's definition of world record. You know, it's kind of like boxing. You've got the WBC, the WBA, the IBF. You have different groups that kind of recognize world records in fishing. But one world record walleye came from Greers Ferry Lake. So I mean,
What's the best fish you like to catch on Greers Ferry?
me, you know, I'm not a huge fan of Greers Ferry, although you can catch a lot. I like to fish for smallmouth bass in Ozark streams primarily, but also Ouachita streams. And I'll tell you why. First of all, I think pound for pound, you won't find a meaner, a stronger, a feistier fish than a smallmouth bass. Now, in our Ozark and Ouachita streams, they don't get huge. I mean, the north, the Great Lakes and places like that, I was talking about the Finger Lakes in New York, they're known for producing big smallmouth bass. I think our state record is a little over 7 pounds, so that's not a huge smallmouth. But you know, a 3 to 4 pound fish in one of our Ozark streams is a giant. You saw the episode, and I caught that fish is probably close to 4 pounds. That's the largest
That
smallmouth.
little fish was close to 4 pounds?
Well, wait
sorry.
a minute. That little fish. Wait a minute.
I
Kerry.
mean, it wasn't
No,
that big.
It wasn't a giant. I mean, you know, our state record largemouth is like 16 pounds. So,
But for a smallmouth, it was a big fish.
a 4 pound smallmouth is a giant, especially from these small streams we're talking about. But I like doing that for a couple of reasons. You can get some exercise fishing out of a kayak or a canoe.
Right.
A fishing guide friend of mine once said, smallmouth don't live in ugly places. And that's another reason I like fishing for
That's
smallmouth.
a tweetable moment.
I mean, it's just, you know, just think about, you know, being on the Buffalo River. I mean, it is truly Arkansas's gift to the world. I mean, it is a national treasure that we're lucky to live an hour and a half from here in central Arkansas. And, you know, you look up at those bluffs and, you know, the majesty of your surroundings, and you look down and you've got smallmouth bass there. And that's one of the reasons I really enjoy smallmouth. And they're great fighters, and they're just so much fun to catch. And I'll let every one of them go.
That was my second question. Do you cook them?
Not a smallmouth. I would never keep a smallmouth.
And why? Because they're too hard to clean?
No, because I meant you were talking about how they're not huge.
Yeah.
They're not giant fish. their growth rates in our mountain streams in Arkansas are just incredibly slow. That fish you saw, that 4-pound fish that I caught on the Caddo River, was probably a 12 to 15-year-old fish. It took it that long to get that big.
I didn't know fish live that long. Well,
Oh,
no wonder
yeah.
you throw them back. Bless their little hearts.
Alligator gar, a truly prehistoric fish that we have in Arkansas. Not a big sport fishery for it, but a very interesting and an incredible fish. I mean, it truly has been around since the age of the dinosaurs. And they live to be, some estimates, 60, 70, 80 years old.
And you catch those in the Arkansas River, right?
You can catch those in the Arkansas, the White, the Mississippi drainages,
Those big rivers.
Washita River down and around Felsenthal National Wildlife Refuge. But they've seen better days. They've been vilified for years, and they eat sport fish. They're no good. Anglers accidentally catch one on a trot line or a yo-yo and they throw it up on the bank. It's a bad fish. A lot of that is probably overblown. I mean, they're part of the ecosystem. They're here for a reason. And we're really trying to work with anglers now at Game and Fish and do a lot of research on our side of things to bring the alligator gar back to prominence in Arkansas.
So there's a fish that spawns certain time of the year because my husband always goes up and it's
On the Little Red River?
no,
Okay.
it's down towards Hot Springs.
Okay.
And it's got a big stripe you have to cut out of it.
the hybrid striped
The
bass.
hybrid striped bass.
Yes, or striped bass. So both of those fish neither one of those fish is native to Arkansas. The striper is actually a saltwater fish. And back I believe it was in the late 40s or 50s, when they were building Santee Cooper Reservoir, a lake in South Carolina. They dammed up the lake. Well, the Santee and Cooper rivers go to the Atlantic Ocean. Well, they trapped striped bass because striped bass run up into freshwater estuaries to spawn and then go back out to sea. Well, they trapped the fish in there, and after several years, people are still catching them. We're like, well, striped bass or stripers can live in fresh water. So in a lot of these large upland reservoirs like Washita and Norfolk and North Arkansas and other places across the South and across the country, we have stocked stripers as just another fishing opportunity. And so, but they still make their fall spawning runs.
They
every
sure
year.
do.
And then the hybrid striped bass is a cross between our native white bass and then these introduced stripers. So the hybrid striped bass is essentially a creature of the laboratory. We grow those at our fish culture facilities that we have at Game and Fish. And
It's a GMO fish.
but they make these fall spawning runs, and they are really a lot of fun. It's like saltwater fishing here in landlocked Arkansas.
They just jump out of the water.
They can pull like a runaway Buick.
And they can just jump all around you and you think and then never get on your hook. Drives me crazy.
Yeah, that's
That's a fisherman's
I'm trying
nightmare.
to remember this quote. Fishing is the pursuit of what is elusive but attainable. The Scottish statesman John Buchan.
So quail in Arkansas, Bob White. I grew up eating quail that my father caught.
Man.
And I saw it on your show where they're trying to bring it back.
Big focus of the Game and Fish Commission right now. And you're right. I mean, people, and I'm 47 and I'm kind of right at that cutoff point. Like, I remember my dad talking about quail hunting and having bird dogs. We never did it together because quail populations by the 70s and early 80s, when I was coming of age and going hunting with him, were really starting to disappear. So if you're, let's say 50, sort of the cutoff point. If you're older than 50, you have fond memories of quail hunting in Arkansas. If you're younger, probably not so much, because the decline of the bobwhite quail in Arkansas has largely been a function of loss of habitat. And that's really, anytime we're talking fish or wildlife, it's all about habitat, or habitat is the biggest piece of the pie when we're talking about populations. But it's especially true for the bobwhite. You think about, we had a lot of small farms, even like small dairy farms up like north of Conway and sort of the foothills of the Ozarks, and people did not farm clean. They fed their cattle native grasses and things like that, and their fence rows had brush and stuff growing up around them, and that's great quail habitat. Well, now drive by a farm up there. First of all, they're very They've replaced the native grass with fescue, which is
So
terrible
well
for-
groomed. I can't stand it.
Yeah, but that quail habitat, I was talking about smallmouth live in beautiful places. Quail habitat is not very attractive. There's not an aesthetic with quail habitat. It's overgrown and shrubby and bushy and scraggly trees that aren't very big yet, but it's great habitat for quail. And so we're trying to, we can't, tell people what to do on their land, but what we're doing is for people who want to bring back quail, we can say, here's some things you can do. Let the brush grow on your fence line a little bit. Introduce fire to the landscape. Fire suppression was the rule of the 20th century, where we Smokey the Bear did too good a job. Only you can prevent forest fires. And yes, catastrophic wildfires are terrible. We've seen it in California, over the past few months. But some fire on the landscape is a good thing. It's always been there. Lightning strikes have caused fires. Native Americans used fire extensively to help manage habitat. They knew what was going on. What you do when you introduce fire to the landscape, you kind of set it back. You get rid of some of the things you don't want, and it clears that leaf litter off the ground. And so those native grasses and forbs in the seed bed, I can breathe again, and they spring to life, and those are the kind of things that are great for quail.
And ash is a great fertilizer.
Absolutely. So there's a lot of things we're doing. The difference with quail is going to happen on private land because
Right.
we public land represents maybe 10% of the land mass of Arkansas. So if we're going to make a difference, we got to get landowners to buy into the program and do some things to encourage quail
You're going to
habitat.
have to get money in there for them to buy into it in their land.
But that's the beauty, Kerry. There is money. There is federal grant money available. We've got money available at Game and Fish. We'll loan you a seed drill to plant native grasses. There are things out there. I'm not here to pitch Game and Fish. I
You
know
should
we're
be.
talking about Well, I mean, I know that's what I do every day.
Yeah.
But
so there is some grant money.
go to agfc.com, our website. We have a quail page there, and there's a lot of check out our private lands program. We have 10 biologists around the state, wildlife biologists that are essentially consultants that will come out. You could pay big bucks for. It's absolutely free. They'll come out and tell you, here, if you want more white-tailed deer, here's what you should do. You want
I love
quail,
that.
here's what you can do. You want to see birds, you want to watch wildlife, here's what you should do.
Tim, let's take a quick break, and then we'll come right back, and we're going to talk about deer hunting, duck hunting, water shortages, and the business of Arkansas Game and Fish. And everybody get their pen and paper ready, because when we come right back after 2 minutes, we're going to give you the number so that you can call in.
You're listening to Up in Your Business with Kerry and McCoy. If you miss any part of this show, a podcast will be made available next week at flagandbanner.com's website. If you prefer to listen on iTunes, YouTube, or SoundCloud, you'll find those links as well. Lots of listening options. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Up in Your Business with me, Kerry McCoy. I'm speaking today with Trey Reid from the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission and host of the Arkansas Wildlife TV show. All right, we got a lot to talk about and 20 minutes to do it. Deer hunting. That's my husband's favorite thing to do. He went out in 25-degree weather and sat in a stand with my youngest son and got up at 4 o'clock in the morning to do it. That just seems to me like somebody without good sense.
Well, now you'd have a hard time telling that to our 300,000 plus deer hunters in
Is that
Arkansas.
how many there are?
That's an estimate. We sell roughly 250,000 hunting licenses a year, and
How many?
250,000.
What do you do with the profits from that? Does it go into the general fund, or does it go specifically
No,
to
it
something?
goes specifically to Game and Fish. Now, it does go into our general
fund,
fund, but hunting license and fishing license sales represent about a third of our revenue. This is not precise, but roughly a third is from hunting and fishing license sales.
That's a lot.
1/3 is from federal money through the Dingle Johnson and Pittman Robertson funds, which are the Sport Fish and Wildlife Restoration Acts. And so anytime somebody buys a fishing pole, a trolling motor, a gas-powered motor, a boat, a shotgun shell, a rifle bullet, a rifle itself, a bow and arrow, there are excise taxes on that at the federal level. that are passed back to the states on a proportional basis based on their fishing license.
I
So
didn't
we've
know
got a
that.
third of our revenue from license sales, a third from those federal programs, and then the other third, we're very fortunate in Arkansas, thanks to Amendment 75, which passed in 1996 and went into effect in 1997. That's the 1/8 cent conservation sales tax. State parks, everybody, every time you buy something in Arkansas, 1/8 of a cent tax is collected for conservation. Now, Game and Fish gets 45% of that. State Parks gets 45%. Natural Heritage gets 9%, and Keep Arkansas Beautiful gets 1% of that. So we get a little less than half of that sales. So that amounts to another, $20-25 million a year Arkansas and Missouri are the only two states in the country that have a dedicated conservation sales tax. And I mean, I have to say that being a native Arkansan and now working for Game and Fish, it's a source of pride. I'm glad that the people of our state saw that it was important enough to pass a tax. When do people want to pass a tax? But that conservation and preserving our natural resources and our wild places was important enough to them that they said, you can tax me for that.
Wow, love that. So, deer hunting, chronic waste and disease. I think I listened to something online where you talked about deregulation in 2016, baiting and feeding. What would happen if deers weren't hunted?
Yeah.
Where do you find out the current rules for deer hunting? There's a lot you can talk about.
Chronic wasting disease is the big headline of deer hunting in Arkansas for the past year. We found out in February of last year, just about 11 months ago, that an elk that was taken by a hunter, we have a very limited permit-only elk hunt around the Buffalo River, tested positive for chronic wasting disease.
What is that?
Well, boy, we could really spend a lot of. I'll try to make it brief and simple.
Okay.
But chronic wasting disease was first detected in a captive mule deer in 1967 in Fort Collins, Colorado. A pen that was Colorado State University and a federal research group was were studying mule deer, and they kept dying mysteriously, and they would get emaciated, and they drooled, and they salivated and urinated excessively, and they couldn't satiate their thirst. And so they started studying it and found out that it's called a prion disease. A prion is a misshapen protein, a protein that naturally occurs, and something happens to make that protein it's abnormal. It's formed funny. Now that abnormality causes those proteins to kind of conglomerate, and it essentially, the technical term, it's a transmissible spongiform encephalopathy, or a TSE.
You gotta be a scientist to work.
Okay, you've heard of mad cow disease.
I was just going to say, does that sound like mad cow disease?
Mad cow is also a TSE. Scrapie in sheep is a TSE, and Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease in humans.
So we've got it
is
in
a
Arkansas.
TSE. We've got it in Arkansas.
But is it in the whitetail, or is it just in that elk?
It's in the whitetail as well. We went and sampled whitetail deer in that area and elk as well, and found that it was pretty prevalent, 23% prevalence.
So how do you
rate.
know what if you kill a deer? Because we eat the deer meat that Brady kills. So
the
are we
thing
going
is,
to go crazy?
we have tested deer in all 75 counties, and I mean thousands and thousands and thousands of deer, and we have only so far found it. We found it in 3 additional counties this hunting season. Those new counties are Washington, Sebastian, and Benton counties. The original 7 counties where we found it last year when we first, detected that the disease was present. Well, I'm on the spot here. Okay, Newton County was sort of the epicenter of this CWD detection.
Where's Newton County?
Jasper.
Gosh, really? Okay.
Yeah, Newton County, Searcy County, Boone County, Harrison, Carroll County, north central Arkansas primarily, and now northwest.
Where the big deer are. Isn't that where the big deer are?
Probably the biggest deer in Arkansas are over in East Arkansas, the
Stuttgart.
Delta, Arkansas County, Deshay County, up and down the Mississippi River. Deer and fish, really all wildlife for that matter, are a product of the the ground they walk around on. So the most fertile land in the state is in the Delta, and therefore the kind of bigger deer are there as well. But, without me, I could probably name the counties if I kept going, but you can go to
that sounds like
AGFC.
10. Okay, go ahead.
There are 13 counties total where we
And you can go where to find these?
AGFC.com/CWD. And that's not, we've got maps there, but also loads of information about what does this mean to you if you want to eat your deer.
What does it mean?
If an animal tests positive, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says you should not eat that animal. Now,
What if I do accidentally and don't know it?
there have been no known cases of people eating
He's fidgeting in his
CWD
seat. I just want
positive.
everybody to know.
No. Hey, I've talked about this a lot. There are no known cases of humans eating a CWD positive deer and contracting the disease. We don't know that. To our knowledge, and I say our, I'm talking about the scientific community, not just game and fish, CWD cannot infect humans. It is a disease of cervids, white-tailed deer, mule deer, elk, moose, caribou, reindeer.
Can you tell if a deer is infected with it?
You can in the latter stages of the
But
disease,
not in the early
but not in
part.
the early stages. Here's what we've been doing.
Are they going to make a kit so we can test them all?
No, but here we have participating taxidermists around the state.
Okay.
We man check stations during the opening weekend of gun deer season in that area where we know the disease is present. We'll test the animals for you that weekend. You can take them to taxidermists. There's a few veterinarians around the state.
You take it and get it ground up, and they throw your meat in with everybody else's meat when they're starting. They go like, tonight we're going to do deer meat.
They shouldn't do that.
But they do.
Well, here's another thing, and this is really, I'm just speaking as a deer hunter myself, but Game and Fish does not regulate the processors. The processing industry in Arkansas really is not regulated by anybody.
I'm going to get my own grinder.
I have one, but Kerry, I would be very surprised that if in the next legislative session you do not see that issue taken up by the General Assembly and try to introduce some sort of regulatory authority over these processors. Now, let's face it, a lot of them are mom and pop operations, and there's people just trying to make an extra buck. And I mean, I'm not advocating for onerous government overreach or anything like that, but at the same time, food safety is a pretty important thing to worry about. And and that's the thing. Game and Fish is not a public health organization, so we defer to the Arkansas Department of Health and the Centers for Disease Control. And, they say if you hunt in an area where the disease is, you should probably have it tested. And if it tests positive, don't eat it. Now, the thing is, sometimes the animals are obviously sick. We just say, don't shoot that animal. But we have said
Actually,
that for
shoot
years.
it and get rid of it. Wouldn't you want to?
Well,
Is that not good either?
yeah.
Because then other animals
it's
eat
going to
it.
die anyway of the disease. CWD is an always 100% fatal disease.
So what's your favorite thing outside activity to do? We're going to do the seasons in the winter.
Duck hunting.
Of course.
I love to duck hunt. Hey, we live in the duck capital of the world. That was the thing my
What about the
father
water?
introduced me to first, and therefore it's been one. It's very active. You can talk. You don't have to be still and quiet on the deer stand, and so I like that. It's a very social type of hunting and lots of action.
What about the water shortages they're talking about?
Yeah, that's something we really need to pay attention to.
Believe in
the
global
alluvial and absolutely. No, I don't think it's something you believe in. I think
Right.
you look at the science, and it's happening.
So is it going to affect Stuttgart and our Delta area?
I think it already is. I mean, we've known since the 1920s that we were using water. I'm using the editorial collective citizenry we here, but we've known that we were withdrawing water from those aquifers at a rate greater than they could replenish
And
themselves.
so for people that don't know what we're talking about, it's the farmers versus the duck hunters down
No,
there.
no. I don't want to couch it in those terms because
Okay.
duck hunters are farmers and farmers are duck hunters, and a lot of duck hunting takes place on farms. I don't think I think what it is responsible water use, and we've got to figure out new ways to do things. And I think farmers are doing that. It's there's several irrigation projects on the board right now, the Biomeda Irrigation District, the Grand Prairie Irrigation Project, that are going to try to divert surface water from the Arkansas River, the White River, and there may be another set of issues that we're not thinking about there. I'm not advocating for or against, but using surface water is one way to prevent using that groundwater from those aquifers.
So for people that don't know what the pros and cons are,
Well, so really what you've got going on, Arkansas is the largest rice producer in the country. We produce 50% of the nation's rice.
and the farmers want to flood their fields.
You have to. That's how you grow rice. You grow it in water, and rice is one of the most water-intensive agricultural crops in the country. So we have to have that water. I mean, obiously, that's a huge part of our economy as well.
But when they drain down the water in the river, then the duck hunting goes.
Well, it's not so much that. It's not really an issue. It's not really a duck hunting farming thing. The issue, I think, is long-term sustainability. I mean, we're talking a lot of communities depend on this water for municipal drinking water. If we want to be able to continue to grow rice and have sustainable agriculture, which is the number one industry in the state of Arkansas, we've got to be careful how we use that water.
Let's get this caller. Hello, we've got a caller. You're listening. You're talking to Trey Reed. Do you have a question for Trey from the Arkansas Game and Fish?
I do. On the CWD topic, I bought some hunting property up in Madison County, which is one of the counties in the CWD zone.
Yes.
And this last year, I was looking for locations to have a deer tested, and outside of opening weekend, there seemed to be a very minimal number of participating taxidermists in that area. Is there a push, or is there going to be a push or some sort of incentive to get more taxidermists or processors on board to do that testing? Because realistically, it would take hours to get that done at this point from where I hunt.
I mean, it's a great point. And, one of the things that we're up against there is, as you're talking about the travel time, it's a very rural part of the state. It's not easy to get around on those 2-lane highways in the Ozarks. They twist and turn up and down. But to answer your initial question, yes, we are constantly seeking taxidermists, processors, and others, potentially veterinarians, to try to help us do that. Because, here's the bottom line. We know that hunters want to have those animals tested. I mean, like I said, we encourage you to have it tested since you hunt in an area where we know the disease is potentially present. So on the other side of that, it helps us have a larger data set and to understand the disease better, where it could be spreading. So we have a vested interest in collecting more samples. So we are definitely trying to get more people on board to pull those samples for us.
That's a great point. Thank you, caller, for your question. Oh, wait, one more.
Yeah. Is there any way in the future that there would be some sort of system where a hunter could take his own sample and send it in somewhere to have it tested?
The problem with that is the accuracy and the viability of the sample. You may be able to quickly and easily, cut the neck of a deer and pull the lymph node out, but another guy might not be. So that's the problem you have with that. I'm not saying it's outside the realm of possibility, but there's being scientific about it and wanting to have a good sample, there's a little bit of an issue with just pull the sample for us. And, you might get a viable lymph node and you might not.
That's a logistic problem. All right. Thank you, caller.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, spring. Where's your favorite place to go in the spring?
Oh, I love to I like to turkey hunt in the Ozarks, and I like to smallmouth bass fish, probably on the Kings River would be one of my favorite places. Near Eureka Springs and Berryville. Love the Kings River. Probably one of my favorite places in Arkansas.
Mm-hmm. I've heard that before. Summer.
Summertime, I'm looking for some air conditioning. No, I'm kidding. But honestly, my outdoor recreational pursuits go way down in the summertime. I do it either really early in the morning or late in the evening. But again, I like those smallmouth streams because, if you get hot, just go for a swim.
So you're not a water sports person?
I'm not really. I don't like crowds, and lakes like Hamilton and even Washita in the summertime get pretty busy with the recreational boat traffic, and that's just not my thing.
But the Game and Fish oversees that?
We do. We administer boating laws that have been enacted by the legislature. That's one of our areas that we do.
And okay, the last season, fall.
That's another time when I like to go fishing. I like to.
I think you just like to fish.
I do love to fish. I like to find schooling largemouth or stripers or hybrid stripers. And October is a good time. They're feeding up, getting fat for winter, and also starting to think about duck season a little bit. In the
You didn't
fall.
say anything about dove or deer.
I do. No, dove. I mean, that's kind of late summer. I mean,
That's my favorite one. It's warm,
it is.
and you get to
warm,
just
and
stand
it's
around.
social. I have done a lot of deer hunting over the years. I don't really deer hunt very much anymore. I'm duck hunting and fishing are my two big things.
Well, cleaning that deer make you not want to have to deer hunt.
I love to eat venison, though. I've got a lot of the good thing is I got a lot of friends who still deer hunt a lot, and so I've got a lot of venison in the freezer. Because we didn't even get to I'm a huge foodie. I love to eat.
You cook.
I cook a lot.
Part of your show is cooking.
Yeah, we've been trying to incorporate a lot more of that, but yes, I love to cook. I got a sous vide
I saw you talking about that. Tell everybody what that is.
It's basically a water circulator and heater. It's a French cooking technique that's been really big in restaurants for the last 20 plus years, but you can get a home version now for anywhere from $100 to $200, and you basically you heat the water to sous vide is French for under vacuum. You seal the meat or vegetable or whatever it is in a plastic bag. I use a vacuum sealer, but you can use Ziploc bags as well. Just get as much of the air out as possible. Then you immerse that whatever material you're going to cook. I usually do meat, but it is a very precise cooking method where you get it. If you want a medium rare steak, you set it at 135 degrees, and from edge to edge, there's no variance. It is going to be perfectly
But you know what I
medium
don't like
rare
about
side
that?
to side.
You're cooking in plastic. I don't like that.
But it's BPA free plastic.
Oh, there you go. The Game and Fish.
Is that okay?
Yeah, that one's okay. In 2000, okay, we're almost out of time. In 2011, Mike Beebe appointed Steve Cook from Malvern as the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission's chairman.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess he still is till 2018?
Yeah, this is Steve's last year, his term. So the way Amendment 35, which established the present form of the Game and Fish Commission in 1944, it is constitutionally dictated as an amendment to the Arkansas Constitution how the Game and Fish works. We have some autonomy from the state legislature, and but the governor appoints a commissioner every year, and they serve 7-year terms.
Can't do it again. Can't do it twice.
Cannot do it twice.
Do you want to be it?
Well, I couldn't be as an employee. Now, if I left, I could be, maybe one day down the road, if we ever, get rich selling this Conquistadors cheese dip, and then maybe I can retire from Game and Fish and be a commissioner and make the rules. It's a tough job, though.
What's the advice or idea that you want to convey to our listeners about the natural state?
Oh, just, I think, when I traveled with ESPN all over the country, it amazed me how little people knew about Arkansas, and I was kind of okay with that because I like it being a well-kept secret. But don't take for granted what we have here. We are very fortunate. I mentioned the conservation sales tax. We're one of only 2 states that funds conservation work in the state, but everybody pays for it. We have some incredibly special places, a diversity of habitats from the coastal plain and the Delta to the Washitas and Ozarks.
We got 2 mountain ranges in Arkansas.
Remember that we have that and go out and take advantage of it. I just wrote an intro to the Fish Arkansas magazine that the Arkansas Times puts out as their guest editor. And I said fishing, but hunting as well, and the great outdoors in general. In these too often troubling and disturbing times that we live in, they are a salve for the soul. And so get out there and enjoy what we've got here in Arkansas.
Salve for the soul. That is a tweetable moment. Thank you, Trey. You've got to come back. And
Thanks.
for coming on the show, I have you a present. It's a suede decorative flag with a duck in the.
Oh, that is too
a camo
cool.
duck flag.
A camo duck flag. Kerry, you've done your research. You know me well. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I just want to say to all of our listeners, thank you for spending time with me and with Trey. If you think this program's been for you, it has been. You're right. But it's also been for me. Thank you for letting me fulfill my destiny. My hope today is that you've heard or learned something that's been inspiring, enlightening, and that whatever it is, will help you up your business, your independence, or your life. I'm Kerry McCoy, and I'll see you next time on Up in Your Business. Until then, be brave and keep it.
You've been listening to Up in Your Business with Kerry McCoy, a production of flagandbanner.com. If you miss any part of the show or want to learn more about UIYB, go to flagandbanner.com and click on Radio Show. Like us on Facebook or subscribe to her weekly podcast wherever you like to listen. All interviews are recorded and posted the following week with links to resources you heard discussed on today's show. Underwriting opportunities available upon request. Kerry's goal is to help you live the American dream.